he has dedicated his life to finance, you know that this is something that he is definitely passionate about. He is taking this education platform. He has become our business partner, and he is here to share information that he is already learned. He is already knowledgeable of, and he is here to share this platform and share information with us to help us ensure that we are successful. So what I want to do right now is turn this call over to our business partner, Dr. Craig Bythewood. Dr. Bythewood, it looks like we lost him. Just hold for 1 second
I'm
while
here.
I have,
I'm here,
Dr.
Tasha.
Bythewood. Okay, got you. Got you.
All right.
Dr. Bythewood, the call is officially yours.
Okay, I hope everyone is doing well this evening. I listened in on our training tonight, and as always, excellent information. Pastor Bird is an outstanding trainer. I really appreciate everything that you do for our business team. I want to begin by making a point that is very important for those of us who are new. And that is that Pastor Isaac Bird said a lot of pertinent things in his training. He made a lot of salient points. But I think the most important point that he made was the one in which he stated that he has only been doing this since January. Oftentimes we feel as though because we're new to something, that's some type of excuse for not being able to do well, not being able to excel, not being able to operate at a high level. So I love his example, and I talk about it a lot when I'm talking about IML, because to me, he is an example of what happens when you just take away the labels of what you haven't done before and what you aren't sure how to do, and you just do it. He's really representation of Nike, because he is an individual that just did it. So my point to you is that every single one of you can do the same thing that Pastor Bird did. So keep that in mind, that he went through the IML Academy first so that he understood what was going on, and he began to trade. He went through his necessary bumps in the road to get the knowledge base that he has now. So just know that we are blessed in that we have an environment where we have an expert as myself who's been exposed to this material for over 25 years, but then we have an even brighter example of how all you have to do is have that stick-to-itiveness and to take yourself through the process, do it with confidence, and then you put yourself on the other side of the money. So I just want everyone who's new to just kind of relax your shoulders and recognize that this is a very doable process. And this infrastructure that we have in place literally makes the learning curve so flat. It makes it happen so quickly. So please understand that. Let me also reiterate something that Pastor Bird said. He starts every single training with housekeeping. And in his housekeeping, he says, this is not a substitute for IML Academy. That is such an important point that everyone has to think about. It's almost, if you think about it like this, IML Academy is like a cake, and cakes are sweet, they're moist. When they just come out of the oven, they taste excellent. You lick the spoon before you cook it. Cakes taste wonderful. Cakes taste wonderful by themselves. But when you put that frosting on top of it, suddenly you just made it kick. You just made it come alive. It was good before the frosting, but it's even better with the frosting. These trainings that we have on Tuesday and Thursday night at 9 p.m. are frosting. So it is so important that you look at it like that. You have to get your cake first. I'm sure that no one on this call eats frosting by itself. If you do, there's a whole nother counseling we need to have on another call. But bottom line is the cake represents the IML Academy and the trainings are the frosting. So please make sure that the trainings come first and then the trainings are on top of that. So there's no way I can tell you how important it is. Think about it. One of the things that we can do to put ourselves in the best position is to create a process where the infrastructure is set up for us to succeed. For example, I tell my children all the time that they always eat your dinner first. You eat your dessert later. Social media, going out to the movies, all that stuff, that's dessert. So you got to do the dinner first. You do your homework, you do your training, you do everything you want to do to be successful, and then you go and do the other things you want. So I say all that to say this. Why not this Thursday, everyone on this call, start your evening at 8:30. So at 8:30 p.m., you go into IML Academy and you do the trainings. You make sure you get through 1 through 4. Then you come on this call. Then next Tuesday, you go through 5 through 8. And then you get on the call. So just an extra 30 minutes puts you in a position where you can get the true value of these trainings by doing your IML Academy first. So I jumped right in, giving my accolades to the training session and to Pastor Berg. So let me officially introduce this call. This is a talk with the finance doctor. A talk with the finance doctor is your RX for Forex. So the concept here, when we first decided to do this, was we thought about the fact that there are economic wounds out there. There are people that are really hurting. You know, I like to talk about the positive things, but let's just be real for a second. 72% of divorces are a result of money issues. So there's a huge emotion associated with money. When people in our family pass away, people argue about what? Money. So the wounds that are out there can be addressed by us coming together and finding a way to write a prescription for these economic wounds. So that's what this is about. This is absolutely about foreign exchange. It's absolutely about investing in cryptocurrency. But the concept undergirding these calls is a talk with the finance a talk with the finance doctor is designed for us to address the wounds that we have been experiencing through multi-generations of our society. Whereas now we want to have an opportunity to, in a non-threatening scenario, we can comfortably talk about our issues and we can put ourselves in a position where we can take advantage of this wonderful opportunity that iMarkets Live has given us. So because we have a couple of new people, I'd like to just tell a little bit about my story, then we'll get into some of the nitty gritty that we dealt with on the training call and answer some of your questions. Before I do that, let me make this very clear. This call is referred to and is labeled and is categorized as a talk with the finance doctor. It is not called a talk from the finance doctor. So the best way for us to get the most out of these calls is for it to be a dialogue. So if you have any question, interrupting me is not an issue. You stop me, you unmute, you ask your question. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you put your question in the chat. Your issues, your questions, your comments, your testimonies are always going to be more important than what I have to say. So please keep that in mind. So the reason why Dr. Craig Bythewood is so geeked and so amped about IML is very simple. When I was 26 years old, I graduated from the University of Florida with a PhD in finance, having been to Howard University, also majoring in finance. So that's 9 years of studying finance. And now finally, I had an opportunity to go out into the world and be an academician, to be a spokesperson for our community, our society, our nation, in terms of having this PhD in finance. When I graduated with my PhD in finance, I was the first African-American male ever to get a PhD in finance from the University of Florida. At that time, I was only the 11th Black PhD in the country. So to me, it was trailblazing in that I had an opportunity to do something that had not been done on a normal basis. So one of the things that I decided right then was that I wanted to be an investor. I'd always dreamed of being able to invest. And I felt at that moment, after 26 years of age, after studying for 9 years, that I wanted to invest in exotic markets. I wanted to invest in markets that I thought had staying power. So let me break this down for you real quick. One of the things about the stock market is that the stock market is what everybody talks about. It's the sexy market. It's the first thing that people talk about. But in order for you to do well in the stock market, it's predicated on a company doing well. Or if you sell short, which means you take the opposite position and make money when a stock goes down, it's predicated on a stock doing poorly. Well, that's the reason why I love the foreign exchange market, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether a currency or a country or a nation or the companies within that nation are doing well or doing poorly. It doesn't matter. What matters is activity. What matters is that there is currency going on. So literally, I knew back then that foreign exchange was one of the markets that I wanted to invest in. So what I decided to do was to do my training. Obviously didn't have a platform like IML Academy, so I had to do Craig Bythewood Academy. So I kind of went into the lab and put myself in a position where I could train myself to feel comfortable investing in these exotic markets. Now, please learn from my mistakes. We have a business partner, Bass Grant, who always says this: it is better to be ignorant and on fire than to be prepared and on ice. Well, I literally did the opposite of that saying. I literally reverse engineered that, because what I did was I stayed in the lab too long. I wanted to make sure I was ready. And so that anxiety and that lack of confidence that I spoke about earlier was on me. So I finally put myself in a position to invest in these exotic markets 10 years later when I was 36 years old. So at 36 years old, I put together a mastermind group. There's individuals that did consulting, that did academia, that were in organizational finance. We all came together, put together this very tight business plan, crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we were ready to invest in the foreign exchange market. Well, guess what? The first thing that we did is what you all talked about during the training, and that is to identify a broker. Now, what did we do to identify a broker? Well, we looked at the type of trading that we wanted to do, and we identified brokers who had that type of training or had that type of platform where, for example, if we wanted to do foreign exchange, they needed to have a foreign exchange platform. So simply matching our desires with what the broker did. Now, let me say a little bit about the brokering function, because some of the questions today were very good questions, but I think there's some benefit in us understanding the way it works. So I love to use the example of Publix supermarket. So what I do on a regular basis is I eat salad. And when I eat salad, then I need to have vegetables. So I go to the market and I park my car, walk into the facility, and I buy the vegetables. Now let's think about how easy that is, but let's for a second break down the infrastructure that is underlying that very simple transaction. There's a farmer who has decided to sell their vegetables. There's a 51-year-old man who wants to try to keep it tight because he thinks 51 is a new 21. So what he's doing is eating vegetables so he can try to maintain some semblance of shape and athleticism as a 51-year-old. So bottom line is the farmer doesn't know the 51-year-old. The 51-year-old does not know the farmer. So what has to happen is there has to be an intermediary. There has to be a go-between. There has to be a middleman that allows the farmer and the vegetable desirer to come together. And that's Publix. Publix simply has created a distribution channel for these two sets of individuals, the buyer and the seller, to come together. That is exactly what brokers are. They are simply a go-between. They are simply a financial market. They are simply the middleman between the buyers of securities, financial securities, and the sellers of financial securities. So when we make decisions to invest in currency exchanges, we have to do so through a broker. So every single financial market that exists in the world is channeled through brokers. Now, I could go more, I could go deeper, I could tell you who they are and how it works and all of that stuff. But the bottom line is, because we're participating in a financial market, we must identify a broker. So that's what I did with my mastermind group. We identified a broker. And when we identified this broker, the broker sat us down and said, okay, in order for you and your mastermind group to invest in the foreign exchange market, it is going to cost you a minimum balance in your account of $1 million. This was 15 years ago. And we needed $1 million to participate. There was even one broker that told us that we needed $3 million minimum in order to participate. So I remember thinking that after all of this preparation, out of 10 years of being in the lab, preparing myself to invest in foreign exchange, I thought that was a dream that died. But in reality, it was a dream deferred. Because here I am in 2018 with the opportunity to invest in the foreign exchange market, that $5.3 trillion market, and that's $5.3 trillion a day. That $5.3 trillion a day market, I can invest in it for $250? You mean to tell me what would have cost me $1 million to $3 million now can be done for $250? And now you're also telling me that there is an infrastructure in place where all I have to do is find two like-minded individuals like me who want to do the same thing, and I'll never pay a monthly fee? This opportunity is phenomenal. After hearing about this opportunity for 13 minutes, I signed up because literally it put me in a position where I could do what I wanted to do 15 years ago for a very, very, very reasonable rate. Add to that the fact that it took me 10 years to put myself together, to do the research. The first thing I did when I came into this organization was I vetted the IML Academy to see whether it was effective and to ascertain this research question. I'm a PhD, we're researchers by nature. So my research question was this: how many total hours would it take for an individual with no training whatsoever to be able to study the cake of IML Academy and be prepared? And the answer to that question, 10 hours. 10 hours. Now, when I calculated that, I didn't make the connection that it took me 10 years to prepare myself. You can do it in 10 hours. So 10 years, $1 million, 10 hours, $250. This is one of those opportunities that is too good to be true, but it's true and it's real. We now have an opportunity to be able to do the impossible, what I thought was impossible 15 years ago. So let's jump into the material. The broker. Now, when we identified a broker, there were certain variables that we looked at that fortunately are irrelevant in the IML platform. First, we always looked at fees. We looked at fees because most brokerage functions do the same thing. So if they all do the same thing, they just provide a forum for us to come together. So there's no real rocket science in terms of what they provide. And there's so many of them because it's such a large market and it's so lucrative. Literally, you pick the one with the lowest fees. But that doesn't apply here because there are no fees, because all we have to do is identify the broker. The fee part has already been taken care of by IML. It doesn't fit in with what we do. What we do is 100% of the money that we make, we keep, because we're investing not in a normal financial currency scenario. We're investing through the IML platform. So the IML platform just requires that you identify. Now just think about this for a second. I say this all the time. When we're making consumption decisions, when we're making economic decisions at home, one of the most important questions to ask is, how are you compensated? How are you compensated? And oftentimes we don't do that. Quick example, credit cards. We use credit cards all the time, and I ask people in financial meetings, so what's the interest rate in your credit card? I don't know. I never looked. So there's so many scenarios that we participate in where we don't even ask that question. But when you ask the question, how are you compensated, it puts you in a position of power and leverage to make strong decisions. So I said all that to say this. There's some brokerage houses that charge you based on your volume. There's some that charge you based per trade. Well, again, these are questions you would ask on the outside, but inside of IML are relevant. So the only variable that is relevant when you pick your broker is, does the broker supply all of the services that you want to participate in? Now, the way I look at it is, like Pastor Bird says all the time, we don't want to leave any pips on the table. So the way to exercise that is to be prepared for everything. I do a lot of mentoring of teenagers. And teenagers have this mindset where they always kind of assume things. And so they take actions based on their assumptions instead of finding out the information. That's how teens are. We were all like that. So bottom line is, I say this to teenagers all the time. Rather than stand on the sideline and predict what's going to happen, get on the field and be prepared no matter what happens. Rather than stand on the sideline and predict what's going to happen, get on the field and be prepared no matter what happens. So I said all that to say this. What we should do is not decide what we're going to invest in right now and then decide not to do other things. We should be prepared to invest in every single opportunity that IML has on the table. And as we continue to get better educated, as we continue to increase our arsenal of strategies and techniques and ways to invest, as we continue to bring our family members involved and teach our children how to do this so that we can change the economic dynamic of our households, we should be prepared to invest in everything. So I said all that to say this. The brokerage choice is simple. It should be based on who allows you to do everything. Do you allow cryptocurrency? No? Okay, let me pick the next one. And there's so many, there's such a long list. And so what you can do is simply ask the question online by just Googling whichever one of the brokerages are and then find out. IML doesn't give you a lot of information on the brokerages on purpose because that's not their deal. That's not the important part. The important part is, what are you going to invest in? Like back to my Publix example. If I'm following a recipe and the recipe tells me to use these vegetables, it never says on the recipe what store to go to. You need 2 tomatoes. So I can go to any store I want and get tomatoes. I'll pick Publix because it's closer and I like their quality and I like their customer service and I like the fact that they have more variety, but it doesn't matter. I can get tomatoes from anywhere and the recipe works. That's the way you want to look at this situation. It's just about picking a broker. And you want to pick the broker that has the most opportunities for you to invest in everything that's here. Now, one other variable that I would look at if I were you, and that is customer service ratings. Customer service ratings. So you think about it, I've only said 3 things. Fees, what transactions they allow me to do, and customer service. Fees are irrelevant, so it's just down to customer service and what they will allow me to do. What do I want them to allow me to do? Everything. So I simply, now, is this a possibility? Maybe I find one broker that allows me to do one arm, and then I'm comfortable with them. And then when I do another arm, I choose another broker. You can. I'd rather have one that does all of them. But really, what I'm really trying to say here is that the information on the broker is such a small part of this equation. So I go online, I look and see what transactions they will allow me to do with my variable of choice being everything. And then I look at the customer service ratings to see anything that's high, and I'm good. That's how I'm going to choose my broker. So let me pause and let me ask if anyone has any questions about that. Any questions about the way the brokerage concept works? Unmute, ask your question, or put your question in the chat. Any questions about the brokerage function as it relates to this IML experience? Okay, I'll take that as everyone understands and everyone is comfortable with this brokerage decision. Now, a couple things I'd like to say about some of the things that we've been talking about. I say this every call, and I'll say it again. I'm really impressed with the way in which we are attacking this information. There's a passion that you guys are showing and displaying in the way in which you're asking your questions and putting yourself together and doing it. And that's a beautiful thing. The one thing I think that we can improve on a little bit is whenever someone says they haven't started investing yet, they say it with this apologetic tone. You don't have to do that. You know, we're all doing this at our own pace. I waited 10 years. So if it takes you 10 minutes before you start trading, that's fine. You want to make sure that you do this with as light energy as possible. We're all doing the same thing. We know life is there, but as long as you put yourself in a position where you make progress and you're moving toward the goal, there's an African proverb that says, how does an ant eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So take your bites and you unapologetically say, well, I haven't started trading yet, but I'll start tomorrow. And you keep doing what you're doing. So again, I'm just really happy with the way in which we as a group are functioning in terms of moving up the learning curve. Now, one thing I'd like to say, I noticed that when we're asking questions, sometimes we use the term, the moving average of 50. And I just want to tighten that concept up a little bit and make sure that we all understand that it's actually a 50-day moving average. It doesn't say that on the curve, it just says 50. So I understand why we're categorizing that. But Bythewoodism, if you know what you're doing, you will always have a job. If you know why you're doing it, you will always be the boss. So just so that we can really be the boss of this information, it is a 50-day moving average. And investment practitioners determined years ago that the 50-day moving average is the best example of a way to track financial movements to be able to get a good feel. Anything less than 50-day moves a little too quick. Anything higher than 50-day moves a little bit too slow. So it's like the perfect blend of time in order to look at the average, the 50-day average. And there have been companies that have tried 60 days, companies that have tried 40 days, and it's just not as tight. It's like literally the perfect equilibrium point, 50-day moving average. Hope that makes sense. So let me talk about resistance. Let me talk about resistance. And let me also talk about pullback. In fact, let me do pullback first. Now, I was a consultant for Hewlett-Packard back in 1997. I spent the summer there. And I wanted to be able to drive around those beautiful hills and beautiful mountains of Northern California. So I shipped my car from Tallahassee, Florida to San Francisco, California. And when you live in that area, I was specifically in a town called Mountain View, which is right outside of Stanford, Palo Alto, where Stanford and Hewlett-Packard is. And they have these huge hills. Have you ever seen San Francisco on television or in the movies, or if you've been there yourself, you know those hills are very steep. Well, at that time, I was driving a stick shift. And my stick shift was very good at going into the first gear. If you've never driven a stick shift before, there's a little bit of a rock back every time you go in first. But what I noticed is that when you go up a hill, I had to be very deliberate about pressing down the clutch and pulling up on the gas to make sure that the car was starting effectively. And I noticed something very interesting. The higher the incline, the more when I put it into first gear, it rocked back. The higher the incline, the more the rock back. The higher the incline, the more the rock back. So I remember being a little bit anxious about that, because I wondered if it was good for the car, if it was bad for the car. So I asked the mechanic out there, and they told me that's just par for the course out here on these hills. And he said the same thing I said. The higher the hill, the more you'll rock back. Well, that is an analogy for what's happening in these currency markets with a pullback. When there is an incline, when you're about to go up, then the financial movement rocks back first before it begins to move up. So it's literally a physical principle. When I say physical, I mean in terms of physics. It's a physics principle in terms of there being a rock back before you go up on an incline. If you've ever ran track, right before you get out of the blocks, there's a little rock back first. And one of the things that good track runners do is they try to put themselves in a position of leverage so they can avoid the rock back and get out of the blocks quicker. So sometimes the faster you're moving, the more you're ascending, the more the rock back. So literally, that's what a pullback is. Because this particular pattern is about to go up, it'll pull back first before it goes up. So one of the things that you'll do is when you're looking at these charts and you're looking at the patterns and you're getting that candlestick recognition, you're able to see that after it begins to pull back, that's the indication that you're about to go up a steep incline. Please understand this. We want to be our own bank. Banks have never been victim to only making money when companies are doing well. They have never been privy to only making money when a stock goes up. They've always taken positions on both sides of the market, meaning when the market's going up, they're making money. When the market's going down, they're making money. Here's an example. My daughter's 17th birthday is on Thursday. So I went to the mall last night. And as I was going through the mall, I noticed the sign for Saks Fifth Avenue. And I thought about what a good store that is, exclusive things, nice stuff, Saks Fifth Avenue. Then after I left the parking lot, I passed by Walmart. Two totally different models, two totally different target markets, two totally different sets of individuals. They're both selling items. They both sell clothes. They both sell appliances, but the energy behind them is totally different. So I use that as an example to show this. Banks know that the economy is doing well, I'm going to invest in Saks Fifth Avenue. And they know if the economy sucks, they're going to invest in Walmart. Because hear me, when the economy is doing bad, more people flock to Walmart. When the economy is doing well, you got a little extra, more people flock to Saks Fifth Avenue. So I said all that to say this. Banks have always known to take positions, financial positions, when the market's going up and when the market's going down. So one of the examples that Pastor Berg gave tonight is when he talked about the fact that this is a sell, but it's actually going to be a buy. This is a buy, but it's actually going to be a sell. What he meant by that is that if I'm going up, I'm going to rock back this way first. But if I'm going down, I'm going to rock back this way first. Let me do that again. If I'm going up, I'm going to rock back this way first. If I'm going down, I'm going to rock back this way first. So the same principle that I'm giving you with this stick shift on a steep hill example, this same analogy that I'm giving you with a stick with a rock back incline also applies to when you're taking sell positions and it's going down. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So once again, any questions about any of the things that I've said thus far? Okay, now let's talk about resistance. I remember when I was a young man, I was a minister for a church. And when I was a minister for this church, I remember that one of the activities I participated in was to talk to people who had just joined the church right after the church and counsel them in terms of this journey that they're about to go on. And I remember after doing that for a number of years, that 80% of the people who came in that room after joining the church said this at a later time. Once I joined the church, the bottom fell out. All kind of stuff started happening. All these things were going on that I just didn't understand. I had arguments with people, situations happened, lost my job, all this kind of stuff started happening. Now, it happened so much that the counselor in me wanted to find a way to define to those people what's going on. What's happening when you make a major decision like that and then the blank hits the fan. And I'm sure you recognize that I'm giving you an example from a church, but this is not a church thing. This is a thing, where in other areas of our life, when we make decisions to do something that's powerful, to do something that's game-changing, to do something that's shifting the paradigm, everything seems to just happen. So let me give you an example of why that happens. Let's suppose that you cook something in a big pot and you have all your ingredients together and you put all those ingredients together, they're in a pot, and you cook it up, and it's excellent. So you eat your stew, you eat your chili, whatever it is that you've made, and now comes the part that everyone has to face. And that is that there is so much stuff stuck to the bottom of that pot. Now I've got to clean that pot. And the pot is caked up with all type of debris that stuck to that pot during the cooking process. The cooking process was so hot and created so much heat that there's all of this stuff stuck to the pan, to the bottom of the pot. Now, different people have different mechanisms to clean pots. But one of the mechanisms I was always taught is before you clean the pot, you soak it. You put the water in the pot so it's full, and then you give it time to soak. Now just think about this for a second. What happens to that pot during the soaking process, which makes it easier for you to clean it? All of the caked up stuff on the bottom of the pot begins to rise up. It begins to rise up. And as all that gook, all that caked up gook begins to rise up, now it's going to be easier to clean because all of that stuff that was stuck to the pot that had been there for all of that time during the cooking process now can come to the surface and you can clean the pot. I wonder how many of you see where I'm going with this. This is what happens to us spiritually. This is what happens to us emotionally. Anytime we cook up a new idea, we cook up a new paradigm, we cook up a new direction in our life, all of the stuff, all of the emotion, all of the anxiety, all of the tribulations, all of the things that have taken place in our life are just caked up. And all of those things that are in the way of us getting to where we want to go, our subconscious soaks it all up. And all of that stuff comes up to the surface. And once it comes up to the surface, now it's easy. You just let that stuff just go out of the window and you go through your little barrier and then boom, you're on the other side. What we do sometimes is we stop, we quit, we get frustrated. We let all of the caked up stuff come into the surface, get in our head, and we stop. But if you think about it, almost everything that you've ever done in life that was worthwhile, you had to go through some stuff first. I said all of that to say this. It's always amazed me that our world, our universe is so well put together. It's so strategically placed that everything operates with the same energy. So the same energy of us having to go through something in order to get somewhere else, the same thing happens with financial market movements. In order for a financial pattern to hit a new level, to hit a new paradigm, to hit a new 50-day moving average, it goes through the same type of resistance. But what you have to understand is in the financial market, the resistance is what causes the incline. The resistance is what causes the movement. Same thing. If there was no resistance, then what you're doing is not really about anything. Think about it. If I made you take out a piece of paper right now and write down every single situation that you've ever gone through that was big, there was resistance. And once you push through the resistance, boom, it was on. It was on. I wonder how many of us are having some resistance about investing in foreign exchange. I wonder how many of us are having resistance about sitting down and doing the IML Academy. I wonder how many of us are having resistance about telling people about this wonderful opportunity. Even though you don't have to tell anybody, all you have to do is just put them on one of these calls and it sells itself. But I wonder how many of us are having resistance. If we can just understand that the resistance is the proof that what you're doing is worthwhile. The resistance is the indicator that you're about to do something big. The resistance is the rationale for continuing to follow through, continuing to push through. Pastor Bird, in one of his trainings about a month ago, talked about all of the situations he had that he called failures. And I got on them and said, those weren't failures. Those were growth opportunities. And look how that growth has gotten you to now. You're training us. So literally, if we look at these areas of resistance as mechanisms for us to get to the other side, it puts us in a better position. So literally, the resistance and the pullback follows the same pattern, that it shows us that we're about to move into another level of currency trading or another level of pips or another level of the pattern, because it's moving through the resistance. So when you see the resistance, that's the indicator. When you see the pullback, that's the indicator. Are resistance and pullback the same thing? No, but they're similar. A pullback is an example of a type of resistance. All you're showing is that once it gets to this point, it just seems to pause before it gets through that next pattern, that next paradigm, that next financial level. And that's how you know that it's about to shift. That's how you know that this is the right movement. So anybody have any other questions about this particular situation? Okay, so let me do another one that I heard tonight, and that is stop loss. Let's make sure that everybody understands the way stop loss works. So basically, it works like this. When you are making a financial decision, we brag on the fact that this IML scenario is such that you don't have to watch it all the time. I've had colleagues who have day traded, and it's a very stressful situation, and some of them have done very well, some of them have done very poorly, but one thing I know about all of them is there were ups and downs. It was very roller coastery. And one of the reasons why it was so roller coastery is because when you day trade, you have to watch it. You have to know what's going on. You have to look at and see what's going on. So let me give you a quick example. I have two puppies. And the reason why I have two is because one of them is going to be taken by my stepdaughter back to college, and we're going to keep one. So right now they're out of town, and so I'm watching the two dogs by myself. So these two dogs are siblings, and I know that they're really enjoying their quality time together. They're about to be separated for the first time, so I'm giving them quality time. So I take them out on the patio. We're having fun. They're enjoying themselves, and they know the rule is don't get on the table. So I go upstairs to work out. I told you, 51 is the new 21. I come back, they're on the table. Get off the table. They see me, jump off the table. Go back upstairs, come back down, they're on the table. Go to the bathroom, come back, they're on the table. So obviously, these puppies are not going to do what I want them to do without me watching them. I have to watch them to get the results that I want. Well, that's what happens in a normal financial situation. You buy at a certain price, and I'm talking about general before I make it specific to foreign exchange. I invest at a certain price. I watch the movements so I can know when to sell. Well, the beauty of what I just said is that if I could find a way to have this be watched when I'm not there, I can solve this problem. My sister's in town with my 5-year-old niece. She loves the dogs. So I came up with the idea, hey, niece, why don't you go outside and play with the dogs? So while she's playing with the dogs, they won't jump on the table. So I found a way to watch them without watching them. Guess what? That's what a stop loss is. A stop loss is a way for you to watch your investment without watching it. So basically, I'm going to use a very simple example so we understand it. I invest at $100. I know that's not the way we do it here as pips, but I just want to make it simple. So say I'm investing in a stock, and I buy the stock for $100. And I say right now, I'm comfortable that this $100 is eventually going to go to $120. But I ask myself, self, what is the most you would be willing to lose and still feel comfortable? I look at my account, I look at how much money I have in it, and I make the assertion that, listen, I feel comfortable losing no more than $10. So since I invested at 100, if it goes to 90, I'm cool. But if it goes below 90, I'm not cool. So what I will do is I will put in an order to buy it at 100, but I'll put my stop loss at 90. So no matter what it does, no matter how many fluctuations it does, if it starts to not do well, once it hits 90, it's automatically going to cancel the transaction. So my stop loss is put into play so that I can minimize my risk without watching it. It's literally my little niece. It's watching them when I don't have to, when I'm not around to watch it. The stop loss puts you in a position where you can decide the most you can lose before you click the button. Does that make sense to everyone on the call? Any questions about stop loss, about pullback, about resistance, about this IML opportunity that we are so blessed to have access to?
Yes, this is Gerald. Question regarding making sure that your account is properly leveraged. So when you set up your broker account and they're asking, do you have, from a leverage standpoint, would you like a 1-to-1, a 1-to-200, 1-to-500, or 1-to-1,000? Can you expound on what that means?
So one of the concepts that banks and other financial institutions have been utilizing for years is to make money with other people's money. Just today, I was talking to a finance class, and I made the point that you invest all the time. You invest because you put your money in the bank, and if they say there's a 7 to 10 business day hold, they're going to take that money and invest. So I say all that to say this. Banks also are adept at being able to borrow money to invest so that they can maximize their return, but only use a small amount of their capital. Let me say it again. Banks are adept at being able to invest and make large amounts of return on their investments, but only do it with a small amount of their capital. So this is called margin. Margin is a scenario where you can use the brokerage's money in order to use money, in order to invest. So leverage is simply a fancy word for debt. Why would leverage and debt be the same thing? What's leverage? From a physics perspective, leverage is your ability to be able to lift more than you could on your own. Well, think about it. Don't we have houses that we're only able to get because of debt? Not for long. Don't we have cars we can only get because of debt? Not for long. So literally, leverage gives you the opportunity to be able to do more than you would normally do because of the ability of debt. So debt gives you the ability to have leverage. So what these ratios are is their margin amounts. So if I'm doing 1-to-1, that means for every dollar that I put in, then the brokerage house doesn't have to lend me any money. But if I do 1-to-2, then for every dollar I put in, they'll loan me $2. So literally, it's the amount of margin that you're using or the amount of their money you're using. You have to be very careful with this because using their margin gives you the opportunity to maximize your return, but it's symmetrical. So you also have the opportunity to maximize your loss. And I probably, instead of using maximize, I use the word multiply. There's a multiplicative impact on the amount of return you can make when only a small fraction of the money is yours. And there's a multiplicative impact on the amount of money you can lose if only a small amount of money is yours. Because hear me, if you lose their money, you got to pay that back. So that's the concept in terms of margin. I think the safe way to do this experience is just to do it 1-to-1. There's really no need of dealing with margin right now because you think about it. Every single call we have, we talk about managing risk. So why add another layer of risk if we don't have to? When we get better, we get more comfortable, when we know exactly what's going on, maybe we'll consider it later. But right now, it's best just to not let margin be part of the equation. Does that answer your question, Mr. Rogers?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Excellent. Any other questions, any other comments, any other testimonies anyone would like to make? Any other questions about anything from anyone? Okay. Well, I think that we've gotten to a good point of being able to end our call. And I really want to thank everyone again for your attention, for your attendance. And I'd like to thank everyone for being so consistent. I'd like to thank the new people because I feel an energy with you. You guys are ready. You guys are ready to make it happen. So let's continue to do what we have to do. Let's remember my infrastructure strategy where we do dinner first, where we go and we start at 8:30 instead of 9, and we go to IML Academy and get caught up on our trainings so that when we come to our 9 o'clock training, we'll be in a better position to put frosting on the cake of our knowledge. So if there are any questions, any comments, thank you very much, everyone. And I will turn the call back over to our illustrious host, Miss Tasha Dyer.
Thank you so much, Finance Doctor. Thank you for all that information and the insight that we received this evening. And just a reminder for everyone on the call, please make sure that you go to byobforlife.net to make sure you sign up for your e-coaching. And all of these recordings are posted in our Facebook group, and they are labeled as the trainer, as a Zoom recording. So they are labeled as our training calls. And they will be labeled so you don't have to filter through them. And once again, I will see you on Thursday night. We will have our live in the market on Thursday. We are live in the market for live tools training, and we have our talk with the finance doctor. And then on Sunday evening, we definitely have our leadership training call. We have our leadership training call with our coach and our mentor, Mr. Gerald D. Rogers, where we are sharpening our tools. We are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What we are doing here, building trading income, learning our skill set. But on Sunday and Monday, we are sharpening our skill set for earning residual income. And on Monday nights, we have our BYOB Power Start at 9 p.m. And all of these calls are IamTheBank.net. So once again, you all have a wonderful evening. Be blessed, and this will officially conclude this call.